Hey everyone, we're just letting you know that today's discussion may contain topics that some people might find distressing. If you are affected by some of the things that we discuss and you want to seek out sources of support, look down below in the link and the description where we'll be offering those to you.
I want to talk about something that I saw actually this past week. So, in a Thanksgiving opinion piece for the New York Times, the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, shared that she miscarried her second child earlier this year. So, in the UK, it's actually estimated that 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage, yet the subject is still kind of seen as a taboo, with many women feeling like they need to hide their experiences or their feelings from the world. My question for you ladies is, why do you think women feel a sense of shame when they miscarry, and how do we support them and open up the conversation to reduce this stigma?
I'll take the first question first. I think we would feel a sense of shame because we feel like we've done something wrong. We would feel like there's something wrong with us, like we're broken. And because people don't speak about it that much, people who have had miscarriages don't understand how unfortunately common they are. I read a statistic that said that 25% of pregnancies end in a miscarriage. And in addition to that, as a woman, there is so much emphasis on this function of our body. When you're a child, you're given a pram and a baby doll as toys, and we are socially conditioned to believe that this ability is what we're most valued for. So it's definitely difficult because of those things as well. But I also think that we need to just be a little bit more open, and we need to talk about it for what it is, because so many people feel shame around it. So many people feel like they're broken and they're not. I mean, I read something by someone called Zoe Williams, who wrote an article for The Guardian, and I'm going to attempt to quote her because she said something that's really important. She said, miscarriage culture from a feminist perspective is the amplification of the shame that's already attached to being female. She said, motherhood, like miscarriages, is the territory on which you find that there's nothing more embarrassing than holding the female apparatus than if you were to hold it wrongly. So, like I said, we need to speak about miscarriages and think of them for what they are. They're medical issues. They're not a sign that you failed, and they're not a sign that you're broken.
I think I would add to that as well. I think anything, and funnily enough, it makes me think about the conversation we was having about porn earlier in the show. Like anything that is secret or taboo, we assume that there's shame surrounding it. So if you're not allowed to talk about it at the dinner table, or if you're like, oh, I can't talk about this around my mum, or it's kind of like, oh, there's something wrong with what I'm talking about. And I think because we don't talk about miscarriages as openly as we should, then there feels like there should be something shameful or something that should be kept secret about it. And I think also, again, the fact that women's bodies are so shrouded in secrecy in general. Like, we've talked about it on the show. Like, we don't openly hear people talking about periods. We don't openly hear women talking about orgasms. We don't openly hear women talking about their sexual desires. And then what you're doing is shrouding the body in secrecy, usually something to do with sex or your reproductive organs or your vagina or whatever. And then you're then adding on this layer of your body, which you have used sexually to become pregnant. And then the pregnancy that was planned doesn't continue. It just adds another layer of like, oh, well, there's already all these secretly things that we can't talk about a women's body. And I think this just really compounds it. And I think it's such a lonely place. I know a lot of women who have had miscarriages, friends, family. Some were knocked out by it. Some were happy because they were like, actually, I didn't want the child and I wasn't ready. Like, there is such a very wide opinion about it, but by not allowing these conversations, we don't allow people who are going to go through it to know that you're not alone. This is unique to you, but you shouldn't feel like there's no one you can talk to who hasn't also experienced this.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Sophie. And I think it's that exact sentiment that you said. There's lots of different reactions to having a miscarriage, and I think there needs to be a space, if you will, or a conversation that allows for everyone's perspective, because I think it's just like one of those things. It's kind of like, you know how people sometimes shame you for the way that you grieve? It's that kind of thing. It's like they shame you for the way that you deal with a miscarriage. So some people will be like, wow, you really got over that really quickly. And then they're just just like, wow, you didn't want the baby? Like that kind of thing. Or some people are like, well, you were only like 4 weeks, so why are you taking the loss so hard? And so I think we need to have that space open for every perspective of the woman who miscarries. I read actually, though, a lot of women feel shame about their miscarriage experience is because they feel like they're not allowed to grieve because it wasn't a baby at 9 months, or because they didn't push it out because it was still growing in them or still a fetus. It's like they're almost not allowed to basically still be as upset if it was a child that was right in front of them. And that actually made me feel really sad, because I was just kind of like, there's no way in this world that anybody could tell me that even if I had created something and it grew in me for 1 second, that I'm not allowed to cry about it for 25 years if I didn't want to. Do you know what I mean? But I think a lot of the time that's what the kind of culture is. So that's why when I read it, they said basically you feel shameful because you feel like you're almost not allowed to grieve. And I think that's where we need to start having a lot of open conversations about it. And I've been hearing women speaking about it more openly. Obviously, I had read Meghan Markle's interview, and I was listening to one of the podcasts that I listened to called Girls No Filter. Anyway, one of the women, she opened up, basically this year she's had 3 miscarriages, right? So she's had them back to back to back. And she was just like, she just felt like she couldn't tell anyone, that she wasn't allowed to. And she felt like basically her body had betrayed her. Like this one thing that her body is meant to do, it just didn't do it. And she couldn't reconcile with that. And it was really hard for her to even articulate that to her husband, because he's obviously grieving with the loss, but it's in a different way. And so, yes, I feel like conversation needs to be open, but it's so difficult because you don't know, I don't even know where to start. I've lost my train of thought. I don't know where to start.
No, I think you said... No, go ahead. I don't have anything to say. I was just going to say that you said a lot of important things, Anissa.
No, I was just going to say that I think one place that we could start, I mean, we always talk about education, guys. Of course, I'm going to say education again. But also, I think there really needs to be trained practitioners who are going to talk to women before pregnancy, if you're trying to get pregnant, or at the start of your pregnancy. And I think it's probably a very, very difficult conversation to gauge, because obviously people are going to feel like, well, I don't want the stress of thinking about that, or I don't want to feel like you've talked me. My fate has now been decided now that you've had this conversation with me. But doctors do tell you, probably don't tell people for the first few months, because there's a high risk of having a miscarriage in the first trimester, the first 3 months. And I think the danger with that, from what I was reading, because I never even thought about it, they were saying, when you say don't tell anyone for the first 3 months, you already put in a layer of secrecy around miscarriage. So it's kind of like, oh, because you don't want to tell anyone if you miscarriage, don't even tell anyone that you're pregnant. And they were saying, well, actually, if people were able to say things, not you are able, but if people were more encouraged to say as soon as they got pregnant, I'm pregnant, if miscarriages happen, then they'll be much more open and in the public forum, because we're like, it happens regularly, and therefore we've created the space to talk about it. But I think practitioners should be talking about this with women, because I think the women that I know that have had miscarriages, the ones who have been really knocked by it, one of the biggest things that they've always said is, I didn't know it happened to so many people. I didn't know that it was 1 in 4. I didn't know that, 1 in 8 people have a difficulty getting pregnant. I didn't know that. It's like, we don't know these facts. So then you feel even more so, there must be something specifically wrong with me, because I'm seeing all these babies, and there are a lot of babies out there. I see all these babies not realizing that the baby is the physical proof that you have gone to full term, or that you've had a premature baby. That's the physical proof. But when there is no physical proof, no one knows. No one understands. No one makes an allowance for, actually, there could have been something there that might have not been visible. But because you haven't seen it now after 9 to 10 months, then suddenly, well, we don't need to talk about that. We're only going to celebrate the ones that are here. So it's just very muddled. We really have to go back to the start with this.
Yeah, I think so as well. that was again something that I hadn't thought about before reading up on this, because I just thought it was just like, you know, the general rule, you don't talk about your pregnancy until after 3 months, just the general rule. I thought there was a girl that I know that got pregnant, and she was telling everyone when she thought she was pregnant, first of all, before it was even confirmed. And then one of my friends said, you really shouldn't, not to her, said it about her, that she really shouldn't be telling people before she's at least 3 months along. And then I thought, oh, so is she, because she was happy as Larry. And by the way, she's had a happy and healthy baby, so she's all good.
Oh,
but,
God.
That made me think, because like someone said that, and I thought like, oh, so is she being irresponsible? You're not supposed to do that. And then I thought in my mind, okay, so then when I get pregnant, I'm going to have to wait however long to tell. Do you know what I mean? So again, reading up on how that adds to it, that adds to the secrecy of miscarriages and adds to the shame. I just, because we don't talk about it often enough, we don't know what else is contributing to it. So that's why, again, like I keep saying, these conversations need to be happening, not just with medical professionals, but just with everyone.
But I think we also need to look at the medical professionals in this, like with the education. I think they have a big piece in it for me as well. And like, obviously I talk about all the time, I've mentioned it several times, like I hate the way we medicalize the female reproductive organs. I hate it. I say it to you guys all the time. I could go to the doctors with a broken toe and they make me do a pregnancy test. Like, it drives me up the freaking wall. And for me, it's basically them telling me that when I'm here, the only possible reason why I would need to see a doctor is if I have a baby. And the only thing my body can respond to, the only thing that can go wrong, the only thing that can go right is if I'm having this baby, and it winds me up. So when obviously doctors say, oh, you shouldn't say before 3 months, I agree with Sophie that it's definitely embedded in shame. I think that thing, it is, for me, I think it's embedded in shame, because you're basically saying that if I walk out here and say to people, I'm 1 week pregnant and it fails, then I should feel shameful or attach shame because I wasn't able to get it past the quote unquote safe mark. And that, for me, it isn't right. Like, if I'm meant to have the baby, I'm going to have the baby. So I should tell anybody I want to tell about the baby. And I think it's what happens after the miscarriage, right? Because for a lot of women, when they think they're miscarrying, sometimes when you call the doctors or whatever, they'll tell you to just wait it out at home. Do you know how horrible that is, to wait that out at home as you watch your child bleed out of your body? It's a horrible thing. And what's not followed up is, like, they make sure you go to the hospital, you get your checkup. But for me, it's the trauma, it's the emotional trauma afterwards. It's like, why are we not giving these women referrals, like, to speak to someone? Why are we not checking up? Why are we not doing a 3-month post check to see if they have some sort of depression or some sort of mental health thing? Because you can't lose a child and then all the doctor does is check on me physically, but doesn't give me any space to work through my emotion, or process it. And it's a traumatic experience. And obviously I think postpartum has now become a big thing, and doctors are finally stepping in to really help recognise that. But I think we also need to step in now when women have miscarriages and say, you know, it's not just enough to give you physical help, but we need to give you mental help as well, to make sure you're covered on all bases.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it changes so much. Like if you're in a couple, like I remember watching a show, actually. I don't know if have you guys seen Friends from College? No. On Netflix. Okay, it's like a sitcom show. It's really funny. It's a comedy. But these couple, they're trying to get pregnant, and they're trying everything and it keeps failing. And then they had one that was really close and they lost the baby and it didn't happen. And the woman fell into the deepest depression, and the husband was kind of like unsure of how to help, didn't know what to do. And when they finally had their like blowout argument, she was mad because she was like, I don't understand. Why aren't you sad? It's like, I'm the only person that's sad and you're not, I just don't get it. So there's so many things, because obviously I think in that situation, he was trying to, he was thinking, I need to be strong for her. And she's thinking, why aren't you being sad with me? Because I know that would just mess me up on every level, and I wouldn't apologize for it either. But I think, I just think we need to expand our like empathy to also everyone who was involved with 100%. Creating the baby. Yeah, because people don't, I mean, yeah, I'm done.
And I was just going to say, like, on that, like, people grieve differently, and people just need to be, everybody, we all need to be aware. And if you're someone who's gone through it, like, there are different experiences. I did a bereavement course when I worked at the NHS some years ago, because I did a lot of work with babies, and I had to go on this bereavement course for if your child had died. And they were saying a lot of couples can break up because the men will be like, okay, let's repaint their room. Let's go on holiday. And the woman's like, I know, I want to sit in the grief. And they're saying a man's thing would be like, people try to move on in different ways. And I think it's very important to see that's the reason why we need to be talking about these things more, because like you're saying, Luanda, in that program, you could be having a different reaction, not realizing actually he's grieving or he's going through it in his own way. But if we never talk about it, you just might feel like he's just leaving me to deal with this alone. So I really hope people get, I really hope we talk about it more, and that we allow people to come and talk to us about it, and don't freeze up and make them feel any worse than some women do by going through this.
Yeah. It's not an easy conversation to have by any means, but I find sometimes that when people are grieving or have a traumatic experience, it's better to just be a listening ear versus a talking mouth. But just
so true.
And just listen, and to just let them say as much as they want to say, scream as much as they want to scream, and just be there to support them.
100%.